Hello and welcome to edupediaworld.com. In the last session we have discussed about that how consumer reaches his point of maximum satisfaction under one commodity model and under multi-commodity model under cardinal utility approach. In cardinal utility approach, we have assumed that the utility, that is the amount of satisfaction from a commodity, is measurable. In this session, we will be discussing that how consumer reaches his equilibrium under ordinal utility approach. The ordinal utility approach was given by Hicks. He has given a different tool of analysis called the indifference curve to analyze consumer behavior. In this session, we'll first explain the indifference curve and then explain consumers' behavior through the indifference curve technique. Let's start first by understanding the concept of ordinal utility. As compared to cardinal utility, where utility was cardinally measurable, which means when I'm consuming a product, I'm able to specify in quantitative terms that how much satisfaction I'm getting from consuming that particular product. In this ordinal utility, which was given by Hicks, it is based on the fact that it may not be possible for consumers to express the utility of a commodity in absolute or quantitative terms. But it is always possible for a consumer to tell whether a commodity is more or less or equally useful when compared to another. For example, a consumer may not be able to say that ice cream gives him 5 utils and chocolate gives him 10 utils of satisfaction, but he or she can specify whether chocolate gives more or less utility than ice cream. Means if I am consuming ice cream, chocolate and chips, then I can very well say that I like ice cream as compared to chocolate and chocolate as compared to chips. Whereas I won't be able to specify the amount of satisfaction in quantitative terms which is derived from consuming these three products. Now let's go through the assumptions which has been taken into consideration while analyzing the consumer behavior under ordinal utility approach. First assumption is rationality. It has been assumed that a consumer is a rational being. It means that a consumer aims at maximizing his total satisfaction from the limited money income he has and the prices of the goods and services that he consumes by spending on the prices of the goods and services that he consumes. Second assumption is ordinal utility. It has been assumed that consumer will not be able to quantify the amount of satisfaction from the goods and services. The consumer is able to express the order of his preference for different basket of goods. Next assumption is transitivity and consistency of choice. Transitivity means that if a consumer prefers A to B and B to C, then he must prefer A to C. Likewise, if the consumer says that for him A is equals to B and B is equals to C, so it means that for him A will be equal to C. Next assumption is that consumer has consistency of choice. Means if in one period he prefers A to B, then in other period he should not prefer B to A. Next assumption is non-satiety. Non-satiety refers to the condition of being full or gratified beyond the point of satisfaction. This makes the consumer to reach the point of saturation where he does not want to consume any more units of the commodity in question. So it is also assumed that the consumer is never oversupplied with goods in question, means that he has not reached the point of saturation in case of any commodity. Next assumption is diminishing marginal rate of substitution. Now, what is marginal rate of substitution? Marginal rate of substitution is the rate at which the consumer is willing to substitute one commodity X with another Y so that his total max satisfaction remains the same. So if we have to see that what is marginal rate of substitution of X to Y, it will be equal to dy upon dx. And under ordinal utility approach, it is assumed that dy upon dx, it goes on decreasing when the consumer continues to substitute x for y. That is, this ratio, the resultant of this ratio goes on diminishing when we use more units of x as compared when we use more units of y as compared to units of x. After studying the assumptions, now we will study that how consumer behavior is analyzed under ordinal utility approach. We do this with the help of indifference curve analysis. Now let us first understand that what is an indifference curve. An indifference curve may be defined as the locus of points, each representing a different combination of two substitute goods, which yield the same utility or level of satisfaction to the consumer. Therefore, he is indifferent between any two combinations of two goods when it comes to making a choice between them. Such a situation arises because he consumes a large number of goods and services and often finds that one commodity can be substituted for another. The consumer can therefore substitute one commodity for another and can make various combinations of two substitute goods, which gives him the same level of satisfaction. Since each combination yields the same level of satisfaction, he would be indifferent between the combinations when he has to make a choice. When such combinations are plotted graphically, the resulting curve is called the indifference curve. Let us understand the indifference curve with the help of a schedule and a graph. This particular example gives us a schedule. We have two commodities, that is X and Y. Various units of X and Y combination has been used to make A, B, C, D and E combinations, which will give us the same level of total utility, that is U in every case. Now in the first combination we are using 25 units of X and 3 units of Y, and we are getting the total utility, which is U. In the second combination also we are using 15 units of X and 5 units of Y. Again we are getting the same utility. Next we are using 8 units of X and 9 units of Y. We are getting the same utility. So we can see here that we are using different units of X and Y and making different combinations, but the utility derived from the different combinations is the same in each and every case, that is U. And we can also see here that as and on we are increasing the number of units of commodity Y, we are decreasing the number of units of commodity X. Then only we are deriving the same utility. Now let us explain the indifference graph. On x-axis we'll take commodity X, and on y-axis we'll take commodity Y. After plotting all the points which we have studied in the indifference curve, indifference schedule, we'll get a curve like this. This is the IC curve, this is the indifference curve. We get the different combinations of the goods of the two commodities used, X and Y, on this curve. A, B, C, D and E. So each combination of X and Y, that is A, B, C, D, E, will give us the same level of satisfaction, the same level of total utility, which is U. So we can say that indifference curve is a locus of points which shows the same level of satisfaction by using two goods, by using combination of two goods. Here in our example, the goods which have been used are X and Y, and by using these two goods we have drawn an indifference curve, and on any point in this curve we get the same level of satisfaction, that is U. Therefore, the consumer is indifferent between the combinations which may be located on this indifferent curve. So this is how the consumer's behavior is analyzed under ordinal utility approach with the help of indifference curve analysis. Now we can see here that the indifference curve is negatively sloping towards its right. Let us find out the reason why. Why the indifference curve negatively slope towards its right? Now earlier we have studied about a assumption related to indifference curve analysis, that is diminishing marginal rate of substitution. Now let us understand this assumption in detail. First we'll understand that what exactly is diminishing marginal rate of substitution. What is marginal rate of substitution? An indifference curve is formed by substituting one good for another. The marginal rate of substitution is the rate at which one commodity can be substituted for another, the level of satisfaction remaining the same. The MRS between two commodities X and Y may be defined as the quantity of X which is required to replace 1 unit of Y, so the total utility remains the same. And we represent it like this. If we have to find out the marginal rate of substitution for Y and X, it will be equal to change in units of Y divided by change in units of commodity X. We can understand the concept better with the help of a schedule. Let us understand that why the marginal rate of substitution goes on diminishing. These are the various indifference points where the total utility will always be same. We have used different combinations of Y and X. We can see here that as and when we are substituting y for x, the marginal rate of substitution is diminishing. When we have decreased the total units of y by 10 units, we are increasing the total units of x by 2 units. Then again, when we are decreasing the total units of y by 7 units, we are increasing the total units of x by 4 units. And when we divide the change in y, that is minus 10 divided by 2, we get minus 5. On dividing the change in y by change in x, that is minus 7 divided by 4, we get minus 1.75. So we are seeing that as and on we are substituting x for y, the marginal rate of substitution of y comma x is decreasing. Now we move on to explain the different properties of indifference curve. First one is that indifference curve has a negative slope. So our first property is that indifference curve is negatively sloping. We again draw the indifference curve. This is the indifference curve. On x-axis, we take commodity x, and on y-axis, we take commodity y. See why the indifference curve is negatively sloping. It's because there is inverse relationship between the units of commodity x and the units of commodity y used. Each combination on the indifference curve shows that we are decreasing the units of commodity y and increasing the units of commodity x in order to get the same level of satisfaction, which in our case will be u. For example, it is u. That is why the indifference curve is negatively sloping. Now our second property is that indifference curves of imperfect substitutes are convex to the origin. Let's explain this. Second property, indifference curve is convex to the origin. We draw the graph here. We see here that the indifference curve, if this is the indifference curve, this is convex to the origin, which means that the curve is drawn like this. It's not drawn like this. If it would have been like this, this is concave to the origin, whereas the indifference curve is convex, always convex to the origin. This is because of two reasons. First one is because the two commodities which are used to give the same level of satisfaction are imperfect substitutes for one another. Means if we have to replace one unit of a commodity, if we are increasing one unit of a commodity, we are not decreasing the other commodity by 1 unit. The second reason is, which we have already explained, is that the marginal rate of substitution of the two commodities goes on diminishing. We have already learned that why the marginal rate of substitution diminishes. So that is why the indifference curve is convex to the origin. Now our third assumption is that upper indifference curve indicate a higher level of satisfaction. Let's understand this. Third property, upper indifference curve indicate higher level of satisfaction. So we can see here if I draw two indifference curve, this is suppose IC1 and this is suppose IC2. So the total utility of this curve, that is IC1, will be more than the total utility on any point on the curve IC2. The reason is that an upper indifference curve contains all along its length a larger quantity of one or both the goods than the lower indifference curve. Here the quantity of the commodity used, suppose on uh, axis X, commodity X is there and here commodity Y is there. The quantity of commodity used of X here is more than the quantity of commodity used of X on IC2. So that is why the curve IC1 has more level of satisfaction as compared to the curve IC2. Larger quantity of a commodity will be obviously yielding a greater satisfaction than the smaller quantity of it. Now our last property is that indifference curve do not intersect nor they are tangent to one another, which means that if I draw this indifference curve IC1 like this, the other curve will not intersect IC1. It will always be like this. Suppose this is IC1, it is IC2, it is IC3. They won't, one IC curve will not intersect the other IC curve like it's happening here. The same ways, if this is a IC1, the other curve, the other IC curve will not be tangent to IC1. Again, it will be like this only. If one IC curve would have been intersecting the other, or if a IC curve would have been tangent to the other, it would lead to unbelievable assumptions, which is that two equal combination of goods yield two different levels of satisfaction. That is in this case. And the second assumption is that two different combinations, one being larger than the other, yield the same level of satisfaction. That is in this case. So these two assumptions are actually impossible. That is why one IC curve will never intersect, nor it will be tangent to the other IC curve. Now, after understanding the indifference curve, we'll now move to understand that how consumer reaches his equilibrium point under the ordinal utility approach. Under the ordinal utility approach, there are two conditions for the consumer to reach equilibrium. First order condition. First order condition under ordinal utility approach is the same as the equilibrium condition under the cardinal utility approach. It is given by, as we have already studied cardinal utility approach, where MUX, that is marginal utility of X divided by marginal utility of Y under multi-commodity model, was equals to price of X divided by price of Y. Since by implication marginal utility of X, that is change in units of commodity X divided by change in units of commodity Y, is equals to the marginal rate of substitution of X to Y, the necessary condition that is first order condition of equilibrium under ordinal utility approach is marginal rate of substitution of X to Y is equals to marginal utility of X upon marginal utility of Y is equals to Px upon Py. The second order condition is the supplementary condition, which requires that necessary condition be fulfilled at the highest possible indifference curve. Now let's see how does a consumer reaches his equilibrium under ordinal utility approach. We draw the indifference curves. This is suppose IC1, this is IC2, and this is IC3. The indifference curves IC1, IC2 and IC3 present here a hypothetical indifference map of the consumer. Now we draw a budget line A, B, which is tangent to the indifference curve IC2. The indifference curve and IC2 and the budget line AB pass through a point E. This is the quantity of Qx which should be used, and this is the quantity of Qy which should be used. Both the necessary and supplementary conditions, that is the first order and second order conditions, are fulfilled at this particular point E. Therefore, the consumer is in equilibrium at point E. This point can be proved as follows. We know that between any 2 points on an indifferent curve, change in commodity Y, the units of commodity Y used, into marginal utility of Y is equals to the change in units of commodity X used into marginal utility of X. And therefore, the slope of an indifference curve is given by change in Y upon change in X will be equal to marginal utility of X upon marginal utility of Y, which is equals to marginal rate of substitution of X to Y. We also know that OA upon OB is equal to Px upon Py. Thus, at point E, that is this point, marginal rate of substitution of x to y is equals to Px upon Py. Therefore, the consumer is in equilibrium at point E. So this is the point of maximum satisfaction. So the quantity of commodity Y to be used should be Qy, and the quantity of commodity X to be used should be Qx. Then the consumer reaches his equilibrium point. Thus, we have now understood that how consumer reaches his equilibrium under ordinal utility approach, and we have also studied how consumer reaches his equilibrium under cardinal utility approach. In the next session, we'll start with studying the law of demand, the law of supply, and how market equilibrium point is reached. Thank you.